Hello there, and welcome to Science for Sleep, where curiosity curls up beside you like a cat in a patch of sunlight, and science takes its time, not to solve everything, but to gently wonder about it all. Tonight's quiet journey is about a strange kind of truth, one that doesn't shout, but whispers in everything that crumbles, fades, or cools. It's the reason why a hot cup of tea becomes lukewarm, why your desk gets messy no matter how many times you clean it, and why somehow you never find both socks from the laundry. We're talking about entropy, the ultimate law of the universe, a law not built on control but on letting go, the soft unravelling that touches stars and sandwiches alike. And while the word may sound a bit abstract or even ominous, it's actually something you know very well. You live it, you feel it, every time the music fades, or the candle flickers, or the moment ends. So tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it in your little corner of the world? Funny, isn't it? A video about the deep structure of reality, and yet here we are, scattered across time zones, meeting quietly in this one shared breath. If this soft expedition brings you a little peace, if it helps your thoughts untangle or your eyelids grow heavy, I'd be so grateful if you gave it a like, maybe even subscribed. It helps this quiet corner find others who might need it. So now, settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts take their shoes off at the door, because somewhere between ice cubes melting and stars burning out lies the story of entropy. Let's begin. Entropy isn't something we usually talk about by name. It's not the kind of concept you bring up in a casual conversation, unless you're very brave at dinner parties. But it is something we all live with, not in numbers or equations, but in sensations, in that quiet ache of change, in the way everything, eventually, falls apart. You don't need a physics degree to feel entropy. You feel it every time your coffee cools before you remember to drink it. You feel it when you open your phone to do one thing, and 40 minutes later can't remember what that was. You feel it when a room that was once perfectly clean somehow, slowly, invisibly, becomes a soft disaster of clutter and keys, and things that no longer have a place. Entropy is the word we've given to the unspooling of order into disorder. It's not a villain. It's not chaos crashing in like a storm. It's more like a slow, inevitable loosening. A gentle fraying at the edges of everything we try to hold together. There's something deeply human about it, because we too are always trying to hold things together. Our routines, our homes, our thoughts. We tidy, we schedule, we try to press the moments flat so they don't fold up and vanish. And yet, no matter how tightly we grip, the tea still gets cold, the bread still goes stale. The sharpness of memories softens like fabric worn too many times. Entropy isn't loud. It's the quiet background hum of time moving in one direction, of candles burning down, of skin aging, of seasons shifting almost imperceptibly until one day you look outside and realize the light has changed. Think about that old drawer in your house, the one you swore would stay organized. A few pens, a rubber band, a spare key, a charger for a phone you haven't owned since before the pandemic. When did it happen? When did order become something else? We often blame ourselves for this unravelling, for being messy, forgetful, inconsistent. But entropy isn't personal. It's not your fault. It's just what things do. And here's the strange, lovely part. We actually expect it. We find beauty in things because they're fleeting. A flower's charm is in its bloom, yes, but also in the fact that the bloom won't last. A perfect moment. Laughter in the kitchen, a quiet walk at dusk, a good book just before bed. It's special because it slips away. You can't freeze it. Not really. Even if you try to photograph it or write it down, the entropy still finds its way in, softly rewriting it in memory until it's more feeling than fact. You can even hear entropy in your home, in the creaks of floorboards that weren't there 5 years ago, in the hum of the refrigerator working a little harder than it used to, in the dust that settles no matter how many times you wipe it away. You can feel it in your energy too, not in a dramatic way, just the slow shift from childhood to now, from now to something else. The way you used to bounce back after an all-nighter, and now you bounce a little more slowly, or not at all. There's entropy in relationships too, not in a cynical way, but in the way friendships can drift without malice, like boats gently tugged by different currents. In how we grow apart from versions of ourselves, sometimes faster than we realise. The friends we used to be, the jokes that no longer land, the photos where we don't quite recognise our own smile. Entropy is not destruction. It's change. Irreversible change. A kind that moves in one direction without asking for permission. And oddly, we find comfort in trying to slow it down. That's why we fold clothes. Why we make lists. Why we freeze meals, save receipts, or back up hard drives we never check again. We are little architects building tiny temples of order in a universe that leans, gently but persistently, toward disorder. It's not futile, it's beautiful. There's something hopeful in that dance, the fact that we know things fall apart and still we build. Still we create. Still we press flowers between pages as if time might forget they were meant to fade. And even though entropy means that nothing lasts forever, it also means that nothing stays stuck. No feeling, no winter, no silence that goes too long. Entropy is what turns beginnings into middles, and middles into ends. It is the breath of change itself. Have you ever noticed how stillness is never really still? A paused movie, a sleeping pet, a quiet room. They all look frozen, but they're gently moving. Air currents drifting, clocks ticking, atoms wiggling. Even in our sleep, entropy continues. Cells repair, memories reorganize, heat slips from skin into blankets. Change hums on. Maybe that's why rest feels sacred. Not because we stop entropy, but because for a moment we stop resisting it. We let things be, unfold, loosen, flow. Entropy is not the enemy of order, is what makes order meaningful. A tidy room means something because it won't stay that way. A moment of peace is precious because it ends. A sunset is unforgettable because you know you only get so many. So as strange as it sounds, the fact that things fall apart is what gives them shape to begin with. And perhaps that's not something to fight, but to honour. Entropy isn't just the law of the universe, it's the pulse of reality, the background rhythm that turns ice cream into soup, stars into dust, and years into stories. And even though we can't stop it, we can move with it, soften into it, maybe even find some peace there. So now that we've felt it, in drawers, in days, in drifting friendships and cooling tea, maybe it's time to look a little closer, to ask not just how we experience entropy, but what it really is. Let's turn toward the science next, gently, curiously, like a cat peeking under the bed to see what's making that sound. Entropy awaits. Long before entropy had a name, long before thermodynamics took shape in the minds of scientists, humans were already sensing it. Not in labs or equations, but in bones and stories. We noticed that the fire dies, that bread goes stale, that time, like thread, frays at the edges, not all at once, but gently, like something loved and worn. Ancient people didn't call it entropy, but they felt the way things unravel. They watched leaves fall, heard wood creak, saw colours fade from fabric and from memory, so they made stories. In Hindu mythology, there is the god Shiva, creator, preserver, destroyer, dancing the universe into being, then dancing it back into silence. Not good versus evil, but order and disorder locked in a kind of eternal rhythm. One cannot exist without the other, like a heartbeat. In Norse myth, the end of the world is not avoided, it is expected. Ragnarok, a final unravelling where gods fall, the sky burns, and frost giants rise from their deep sleep. But even that is not the end. Afterward the world renews, From ashes, green shoots. From endings, beginnings, entropy, then rebirth. And in the myth of the phoenix, across Greek, Egyptian, and Persian traditions, a fiery bird burns itself to ash, only to rise again, reborn from the very ruin it became. Destruction isn't failure, it's the next step. Entropy is a kind of sacred cycle. Even in folk wisdom we find whispers of it. Nothing lasts forever. All things must pass. You can't step into the same river twice. Phrases spoken not with despair but with a kind of quiet acceptance, like sighing with the wind, not against it. In ancient China, the Tao speaks of balance, the flow between opposites, yin and yang, rise and fall, order and its undoing. The more you try to resist the current, the more tired you become. But if you float, you begin to see the beauty in where the water takes you. Cultures everywhere created rituals to try to honour entropy, to contain it, briefly, with song or structure. New Year's celebrations, for instance. Every culture has one. A moment to say goodbye to what's fallen apart and step into the next cycle with a little hope in our pocket. We light fires, ring bells, sweep our homes, make resolutions, not to stop decay, but to mark its turning, to bow gently to the passing of time. Even funerals, sacred across almost every culture, are not just about grief. They're acknowledgements that the body returns to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Entropy is present, not as a thief, but as a messenger. This was real. This was loved. Now let it rest. And so we built monuments, great pyramids to outlast sand and wind, stone circles to mark the passing sun, temples carved from mountain rock to defy the creeping grasp of time, all acts of defiance and also of reverence, because in building these things we weren't trying to deny entropy. We were talking to it, negotiating, saying, I know nothing lasts, but let this last a little longer. Language too carries entropy within it. In English we speak of things falling apart, going to waste, or being past their prime. In other languages the metaphors shift. In Japanese there's a concept called mono no aware, the gentle bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of things. Not sorrowful, just tender, like watching cherry blossoms fall and feeling both joy and the soft ache of knowing they won't last. In Portuguese there's saudade, a longing for something that's gone or maybe never quite was. It's a kind of emotional entropy, the loosening of a moment that never really belonged to time. In some Native American traditions, time isn't linear at all, but cyclical, a spiral, not a line. Entropy is not a fall, but a turning, the end of one season naturally birthing the next. Some African philosophies speak of Ubuntu, the belief that we are defined through one another. In that view, even as the self changes, dissolves, fades with time, what remains is connection, the web, not the thread. And in modern life, we still perform rituals to tame entropy. Spring cleaning, journaling, digital backups, New Year's goals, anniversaries, even a tidy calendar app. Little ways we try to put fences around the wildness of change. We've long made art from decay, a cracked teacup, a weathered face, a melody played just once. Photography itself is an act of entropy awareness, trying to bottle a moment before it slips away. Painters like Turner captured the sea as it dissolved into sky. Writers like Rilke praised the beauty of the fading, and the Japanese practice of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, treats the cracks not as flaws but as history, as beauty made visible. Because perhaps the truth is, we don't fear entropy because it destroys. We fear it because it reminds us that everything is temporary, including the parts we love most. But maybe that's also why we love so deeply, why we create, why we make stories and lullabies and towering cathedrals. Not because they last, but because we know they won't. Every candle is most beautiful in its final flickers, every laugh more precious because it echoes then fades. We don't escape entropy. We live with it. We dance with it. We write songs about it. We teach our children how to say hello, knowing full well they'll one day need to say goodbye. Entropy is not just in physics labs or blackboard equations. It's in lullabies. It's in wrinkles. It's in love. The kind of love that knows it won't last forever, and so gives itself fully while it can. So when we look back across cultures and time, we find that entropy has always been here, not just as a law of the universe, but as a quiet thread woven through myth, ritual, art, and language, whispering to us that what changes matters, and what fades was real. Let's hold that thought gently as we move next into the world of science, where entropy gets its formulas, its definitions, its place in the laws of physics, not to replace the poetry, but to let both sides sing together, the myth and the math, the feeling and the formula, the soul and the science. Let's step softly into that next chapter and ask the universe, what is entropy, really? Entropy may sound like the kind of concept you'd meet in a textbook. Long equations, stern professors, the faint smell of chalk in the air. But when you trace it back to its essence, it starts with something much simpler. Heat. Specifically, what heat does, where it goes, and why it never seems to come back quite the same. In the 1800s, as factories hummed and engines roared through the industrial age, scientists began to wonder, why do machines get warm when they run? Why do they lose energy, no matter how well we design them? Why does the world seem to drift from useful energy to less useful? Enter thermodynamics, a beautiful word really. It simply means the dynamics of heat, its movement, its patterns, its preferences. The second law of thermodynamics, that's where entropy steps into the spotlight, and it says in its quiet, stubborn voice, energy spreads out, not always instantly, not always obviously, but inevitably. You light a match, and the heat flows outward, not inward, not up and back into the match, but away, dispersing, becoming harder to gather again. You put an ice cube in a cup of tea. The cold doesn't stay in a neat corner. It spreads, it blends, until the whole cup is the same temperature, not colder, not hotter, just balanced, even, boring maybe, but natural. That spreading, that movement from difference to sameness, is entropy at work. Entropy isn't the destruction of energy. Energy is conserved. That's the first law of thermodynamics. You can't create or destroy energy. But the quality of that energy, that's something else. That's where entropy speaks. It tells us that while energy doesn't disappear, it does become less useful, less focused, less capable of doing work. Imagine a wind-up toy. You twist the key and it scurries across the floor, spinning, bumping into walls, alive in its tiny way. That's low entropy. Energy in a concentrated form, ready to move, to do something. But then it slows and stops. The energy hasn't vanished. It's just become heat, soft and unhelpful, drifting into the room. Still there, but no longer able to wind a spring or turn a gear. This is entropy's favourite story. The transition from possibility to stillness, from potential to peace. And the universe loves it. Entropy always increases, says the second law. In any closed system, a cup of tea, a forest, a galaxy, entropy moves in one direction, up. Not because it's malicious, not because it's cruel, but because in all the ways energy could arrange itself, the disordered ways far outnumber the ordered ones. Think of it like shuffling a deck of cards. There's only one perfect order, ace to king, suits aligned, but how many imperfect ones? Thousands, millions. Now think of molecules in a box, neatly lined up on one side. That's order, low entropy, but give it a minute. They'll spread out, bounce around, explore every corner, and once they do, they won't return to the neat little line again. Not without effort, not without input. This is entropy, the mathematics of messiness, the inevitability of spread. It's why refrigerators hum, working endlessly to fight entropy inside, cooling your leftovers, pushing back against the natural rise of disorder. It's why your body needs calories, not just for movement or thought, but to keep order inside your cells. You are, in many ways, a small entropy-fighting machine, burning fuel to maintain patterns in a universe that prefers randomness. Even life, the shimmering miracle of it, is not a defiance of entropy, but a clever dance with it. Life creates temporary order by increasing entropy elsewhere. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every bite of food, it all produces waste heat, spent energy, tiny contributions to the universe's ever-rising entropy. And yet, it's not bleak. It's just the way things move. The second law doesn't forbid beauty. It explains why beauty is fleeting, why it matters, why it's rare. Entropy is why a crystal vase can shatter, but never spontaneously unshatter. Why smoke curls upward and disappears, but never folds itself back into the candle wick. It's why you can remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. Because entropy doesn't just govern heat, it governs time. In physics, most laws work in both directions. You can run the equations forward or backward, and the math still checks out. But entropy doesn't play that game. It points one way, forward, always forward. And that forwardness is how we know what a moment means. Before, the vase was whole. After, it's not. Before, the tea was hot. Now, it's warm. Before, you were a child. Now, you're something else. More complex, more weathered. More you. Entropy, in that sense, gives time its arrow. Without it, the universe would have no preferred direction, no past, no future, just an endless, frozen possibility. But entropy warms it up. It makes the clock tick. It makes memory meaningful. It lets stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. Even black holes, those strange, terrifying, fascinating edges of reality, obey entropy. In fact, they may be the most entropic things we know. Stephen Hawking, brilliant and cheeky as ever, discovered that black holes have entropy and temperature. They even glow, very faintly, through something called Hawking radiation, and eventually they too evaporate. Even the most powerful objects in the universe are not safe from entropy's soft, slow hand. Entropy is not fast, it's patient. It waits. It knows that even stars will burn out, that even the brightest galaxies will drift into darkness, that one day, far beyond any calendar will ever make, the universe will reach a kind of quiet equilibrium. No gradients, no temperature differences, no useful energy left. A state scientists call the heat death of the universe. Not dramatic, not explosive, just still. But that's a long, long way from here. And in the meantime, there's so much entropy left to make, so much motion, so much music, so many stories yet to unfold before the final stillness. And here we are, you and me, resting between two chapters, listening to the hum of entropy as it shapes the warmth of the room, the rhythm of your breath, the quiet turning of thoughts that are already shifting into something softer. So let's continue. There's more to entropy than heat and stillness. It has layers, branches, mysteries we've only begun to touch. Let's follow those branches in the second half of this explanation, deeper into the science, gentler into the unknown. We often think of entropy as a matter of heat, of ice melting, steam rising, cups of tea cooling quietly on the table. But entropy, it turns out, is far more versatile than that. It seeps into everything, from the hum of your computer to the silence between your thoughts. Because entropy doesn't just deal in energy, it deals in information too. In the middle of the 20th century, as the world became wired and machines began to listen, a new kind of science began to bloom. The science of information, of bits and signals, of messages sent and received. And there, hiding among the ones and zeros, was entropy once again. But this time, not as heat, but as uncertainty. In information theory, entropy is a measure of surprise, of unpredictability. If a message is entirely predictable, say a string of 1,000 A's in a row, it has low entropy. It's neat, orderly, but not very informative. Now imagine a message full of wild random letters: Q, Z, 4, Y, 9, F. No patterns, no expectation. That's high entropy. It's disorderly, but rich in information, because to understand it, you have to pay attention. Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, used entropy to describe the limits of what could be communicated in a noisy world. How much could be said before the message was drowned out by static, by randomness, by the rising tide of disorder? And so entropy, once the language of steam engines, became the language of telegraphs, of computers, of code. Even now, when you stream a video, send a message, store a photo, entropy is there, quietly managing the dance between order and chaos, between meaning and noise. There's a poetry to that. Because what is a human life, if not a string of messages sent across the noise? A sentence said just right. A memory recorded and replayed long after the moment has passed. Entropy also touches our choices, not just in thermodynamics or data, but in probability itself. Every system has more disordered states than ordered ones. That's not philosophy. It's math. There are more ways for your socks to mismatch than to match. More ways for your hair to be slightly off than perfectly styled. More ways for your day to become unpredictable than to go exactly as planned. It's not that the universe prefers chaos, it's that chaos is simply more likely. That's why entropy increases, because the odds are stacked in its favour, not in some malicious way, just in the quiet, stubborn statistics of possibility. And yet, there are edge cases, strange places where entropy does something unexpected, or seems to pause, or at least pretend to. Take the idea of Maxwell's demon, a thought experiment dreamed up in the 1800s by physicist James Clerk Maxwell, who must have had a mischievous streak. He imagined a tiny creature, a demon, not in the devilish sense, but as a playful placeholder who sits between two chambers of gas. This creature watches each particle carefully, opening and closing a tiny door to let only the fast particles go one way and the slow ones the other. Over time, one side would heat up, the other would cool down, without any energy added, seemingly violating the second law, a rebellion against entropy. But later thinkers realized to do its job, the demon must observe. It must measure, store, remember. And those acts, those little bits of awareness, generate entropy too. You can't outsmart entropy by being clever, not even with a demon on your side. Even observation has a cost, even thought leaves a trace. Then there's entropy in the quantum world, a place already fuzzy with uncertainty. There, entropy becomes more abstract, not just about heat or surprise, but about entanglement. The strange way two particles, once connected, remain linked across space and time. Quantum entropy helps describe how these relationships degrade, how quantum information becomes lost, not in the void, but in the endless webs of interaction. It's been said that black holes are the ultimate paradox here. If something falls into a black hole, what happens to the information it carried? Is it gone forever? Hawking once thought yes, that the information simply vanished, but that clashed with quantum mechanics, which insists information must be conserved. This mystery, the black hole information paradox, remains one of the great puzzles in physics, a place where gravity, thermodynamics, and quantum theory circle one another, like dancers who can't quite agree on the rhythm. And maybe that's what entropy is, in its deepest form, the rhythm of the universe as it shifts from complexity to stillness, from patterns to probabilities, from knowns to maybes. Entropy isn't a mistake. It's a map, a direction, a song with a tempo all its own. It gives shape to possibility. It explains why structure is hard won, why life is fragile, why memory matters. Because against entropy's gentle tide, every form we make, every pattern we notice, every brief flicker of beauty, feels like a little rebellion, a soft yes in a world that leans toward no. Even the stars are temporary, burning not forever, but for a time, long enough to make carbon and planets and you. Entropy will one day claim the sun, and every sun, but not yet, not now. For now there's warmth, there's breath, there's a story being told in every flicker of flame, in every heartbeat, in every whispered sentence shared before sleep. And so we honour entropy not just by understanding it, but by living with it. By knowing that nothing lasts and still choosing to care. We arrange our furniture, we write love letters, we blow out candles on birthday cakes knowing they'll burn down again. And we try, in our own small way, to place a little order inside the wide unfolding mess. Because even as entropy rises, we still create, still build, still hope. And maybe that's the most beautiful part. Not that we can stop entropy. We can't. But that we dance anyway. Knowing the music won't last. Knowing the curtain will fall. We dance anyway. So let's pause now and take one deep breath in this moment of relative stillness. Because while entropy increases, so too does understanding. Let's move forward next into how we came to know this law. The story of how humans, curious and tired and endlessly stubborn, began to chart the soft slope of the universe's unravelling. From steam engines to stars, from tea to time itself, how we came to hear entropy's whisper and to write it down. But that's for the next part of our little expedition. We'll get there soon. For now, let your thoughts rest in the soft warmth of knowing. You're floating on a current older than stars, and that current, gentle, irreversible, patient, is entropy. Entropy may be quiet, but it is never still. It's always doing something, changing, shifting, counting possibilities behind the curtain of what we see. So now let's take a closer look at how it works, not just in theory, but in the many corners of the universe where entropy makes itself known. Let's begin in a place we know well, the human body. A. Mechanism, Entropy and Biology. Every cell in your body is a tiny battleground between order and entropy. Within you are trillions of microscopic machines, enzymes folding, proteins assembling, DNA unwinding, all with astonishing precision. But this order is hard won. It takes energy to build it, calories to power it. Without that steady stream of fuel, the intricate architecture begins to fall apart. Cells die, systems collapse. Entropy, unopposed, takes the lead. And so your body, like a little empire of biology, spends every second pushing back against entropy. Not to win forever, but to buy more time, more life. You are in a very real way a local pocket of low entropy in a high entropy universe. A small miracle of pattern and persistence. But this isn't cheating the laws of physics. It's playing by them very cleverly. Because for every bit of order your body creates, it produces even more entropy elsewhere, mostly in the form of heat. Each breath you take, each thought you think, releases tiny packets of energy into the surrounding air. Warmth, motion, the soft exhale of a universe still unfolding. This is how life survives, not by breaking the second law, but by working within it, creating temporary havens of order that drift eventually back into the wide sea of change. Even your brain, that dense nest of neurons and electricity, is a complex entropy engine. Conscious thought is not a static thing. It's motion, it's signal and noise. It's constantly reorganizing itself in response to what you learn, what you feel, what you remember. Entropy isn't just around you, it's within your sense of self. Your identity is a process, not a possession, and entropy is what makes it flow forward, one moment into the next, memory into forgetting, certainty into question. B. Implications, Entropy and time, memory and the mind. Now think of time again, that river we cannot swim against. Why does it move forward? Why do we remember yesterday but not tomorrow? Many physicists believe entropy is the key. As we saw before, most laws of physics are time-symmetric. They don't care which direction the clock ticks, but entropy does. And that asymmetry may be what gives time its arrow. We don't remember the future because entropy hasn't had its say there yet. It hasn't increased. It hasn't shuffled the deck. Memory then may be entropy in action, the brain-changing states, recording differences, leaving a trace. To remember something is to make the universe slightly more entropic, more complicated, more after than before, and when you dream, when your mind wanders through landscapes that never were, you're still engaging entropy, just in different configurations. Dreams, thoughts, memories, they're all part of the same thermodynamic dance. Entropy doesn't pause just because you close your eyes. If anything, it gets creative. C. Anomalies and curiosities. Entropy's strange moments. But not everything follows entropy quite so cleanly. There are curious places, out on the fringes of physics and thought, where entropy seems to stutter, hesitate, or spiral sideways. Take self-organization, the process by which things spontaneously form patterns. A whirlpool, a snowflake, the spiral arms of a galaxy. How do these forms emerge from disorder? The answer, oddly enough, is that they serve entropy. They allow for faster dissipation of energy. They're not exceptions, they're facilitators. That spiral galaxy, it forms because it's a more efficient way to move stars and gas toward entropy. That snowflake, it forms because it can shed energy in a structured way as water molecules freeze. Order in these cases is a strategy, a brief staging ground for a greater chaos to come. Or consider the phenomenon of negative entropy, a term coined by physicist Erwin Schrödinger in his little book What is Life? He described living organisms as consuming negative entropy, not creating order out of nothing, but importing it. When you eat, you're not just consuming nutrients, you're taking in low entropy material, structured molecules, energy-rich substances, and using them to maintain your own internal order, while, in the process, increasing the entropy of your surroundings. It's a fair trade, it keeps you alive, but eventually the balance tips, the entropy wins, and that too is part of the cycle. Even in death there is no violation of the law, only a continuation, a release of structure, a return to the broader flow. And then there's the realm of entropy and language. Some linguists and philosophers have noticed that language itself follows entropy-like patterns. Over time, words simplify, grammar erodes, rules become exceptions, then become rules again. The way we speak now is more efficient but also more entropic than the way we spoke centuries ago. It's not decay in the sad sense, it's just change, drift, the movement from one configuration to another, just like everything else. D. Experiments and paradoxes. Watching entropy. Move. You might be wondering, can we actually see entropy happen? Not in the way we see colour or shape, but yes, there are experiments that measure its movement. One famous example is the Brownian ratchet, a thought experiment devised by Richard Feynman to test whether you could extract useful energy from random molecular motion. The idea was simple, a tiny paddle wheel in a fluid full of bouncing particles. Could you by clever design make those random jostlings do work? The answer, after some very elegant math, was no. Entropy still holds. Even at the tiniest scales, randomness doesn't become motion without a price. Another elegant experiment involved reversing the arrow of time, at least temporarily. Scientists have run simulations where a system of particles moves from disorder into order, the reverse of entropy. But to do that, they had to precisely set the initial conditions, every molecule in place, every motion perfectly calculated. It's possible, but only with incredible precision. So precise, in fact, that it's practically impossible in the real world. The message is clear. You can reverse entropy, but only by expending more energy, by fighting the odds, by swimming upstream in the river of time. It's not forbidden, just unlikely, unnatural, a bit like a perfect soufflé rising while the oven is off. Entropy prefers freedom, spontaneity, wiggle room, and the more particles involved, the harder it is to turn back. In small systems, like a few atoms, entropy can wiggle and loop and even decrease for a moment. But as systems get bigger, the law asserts itself with patience and weight. So here we are, small creatures in a vast lawful universe, watching entropy do its dance in everything from stardust to syntax. And yet, the law is not cold. It's not cruel. It's just honest. Entropy tells us that everything moves toward more probable configurations, not because the universe is messy, but because it's generous. It allows everything, even order, especially order, for a time. And now, as we drift into the next section, let's explore that time. Not just time as we know it, but how our understanding of entropy evolved, step by step, thought by thought, from fire-warmed hands to black hole physics. A story of thinkers, dreamers, and very patient water clocks. We'll begin that tale soon. But for now, let this truth settle in. Entropy is not a curse. It's a canvas, a gentle slope upon which all things fall, not in despair, but in rhythm. Even you. If you step far enough back from anything, a city, a storm, a single thought, the details blur and patterns begin to emerge. Entropy works the same way. At the human scale, it's scattered, in melting ice cubes and dusty bookshelves. But when you rise slowly up through clouds past satellites and starlight and look at the whole universe, entropy becomes a story about everything. Let's talk softly about the cosmos. Entropy and the fate of the universe. Cosmologists, the ones who chart the lives of galaxies like gardeners tracing vines, believe that entropy is more than just a curious law. It may be the law, the rulebook beneath the rulebook, the quiet hand turning every cosmic page. In the beginning, as far as we can tell, the universe started in a state of extraordinarily low entropy. That's one of the strangest facts in all of science. The Big Bang, hot, dense, chaotic, should sound like a messy beginning. But by the math, it wasn't. It was somehow tidy, balanced, full of usable energy, potential. It was the starting gun for entropy, not the end, but the beginning of things falling apart in exactly the right way. From there, entropy began to climb, galaxies formed, stars ignited, planets cooled, and the arrow of time, well, it took flight. You, listening now, are somewhere along that slope. A conscious shape made of atoms that once lived in stars. A brief flame in a long night of rising entropy, and the night will rise. The second law tells us that, in a closed system, entropy can never decrease. And as far as we know, the universe is one very large, very patient closed system. So what happens next? In trillions of years, stars will burn out, even the most massive ones. What remains will be embers, white dwarfs cooling in silence, black holes slowly evaporating, galaxies growing dim like lanterns in a fog. Eventually the universe may reach heat death, a state of maximum entropy, where everything is uniform. No temperature gradients, no useful energy, no structure to dismantle, because structure will be gone. It won't be dramatic. No explosion, no collapse, just equilibrium. A kind of cosmic stillness that stretches on not for years or centuries, but for eons beyond imagination. But don't worry, you'll never see it. No one will, and even if they did, there would be no eyes left to notice. It's not a horror story, it's just entropy reaching its quiet conclusion, and yet, even in this forecast, there's something peaceful. The idea that everything will balance out, that all tension, all imbalance will one day settle. Not because of perfection, but because there's nothing left to change. And maybe that's what eternity is. Not golden harps and floating castles, but a long sigh at the end of a busy day. A return, entropy, emergence, and the unexpected. Of course, it's worth asking, if entropy always increases, how did we get here? How did the universe, barreling toward disorder, produce stars, cells, symphonies, and quiet YouTube videos about entropy? It's a beautiful paradox. Entropy allows for local order to emerge as long as the total disorder still increases. Think of Earth. We're not a closed system. We're bathed in sunlight, a steady stream of low entropy energy from the sun, and we radiate that energy back into space as heat, high entropy radiation. That difference is what allows forests to grow, brains to think, civilizations to rise. It's what powers everything from tulips to telescopes. We build sandcastles, make breakfast, write poetry, not in defiance of entropy, but in harmony with it. Entropy doesn't forbid complexity. It just makes it fleeting. You can build a tower of cards. It just won't stand forever, and that's what makes it precious. Entropy and free will, a whisper from physics. Now let's stretch a little, not toward answers, but toward wonder. If entropy defines the direction of time, then what does that say about choice? Is your decision to press play on this video a domino in a fixed sequence, or a ripple of randomness surfing the sea of entropy? Some scientists and philosophers argue that entropy is linked to probability, to the space between certainty and surprise, and in that space we find freedom. Not absolute freedom, not chaos, but room, wiggle room, enough to change course, to choose. If the universe was perfectly ordered, we'd be automatons. If it were pure chaos, we'd be noise. But here, in this golden middle ground, this entropy-defined world, this structure with softness, prediction with possibility, it might just be the only place free will could exist. Entropy, it seems, is what allows us to be both grounded and mysterious, predictable, but not entirely. Entropy, and the sacred shape of impermanence. And now, as we prepare to move toward deeper reflections, let's pause to consider entropy not as a fact, but as a feeling. Because even in its harshest implications, the stars going out, the heat death of the universe, entropy has never been about despair. Not really. Entropy is what makes the moment matter. It's what turns a random Tuesday afternoon into something beautiful, precisely because it won't happen again. It's why photographs fade but memories deepen, why songs end, why we cry at the last page of a good book. We call it sadness sometimes, loss, letting go. But maybe it's not loss at all. Maybe it's just recognition that something real passed through us and changed us. Entropy isn't cruelty. It's closure. It's the full arc, the bloom and the fall, the moment and the memory. In that sense, entropy is not the enemy of meaning. It is meaning. Because what matters most is never what lasts longest. It's what touches us before it goes. So perhaps entropy isn't a law we resent, but a rhythm we live by. A permission slip for wonder. A reminder to notice, to care, to breathe. Because all of this conversation, this thought, this gentle unfolding, is just a flicker. And isn't that what makes it beautiful? To understand a thing deeply, humans often start by staring at it for a long time, by poking it with sticks, building fires around it, writing stories about it. Sometimes, long before we give it a name, we feel its shape. Entropy, that soft, invisible law of change, was one of those things. We didn't recognize it as a law at first. We just noticed that firewood turns to ash, that warmth slips away, that what is done cannot be undone. And so we began, as we always do, by asking questions. What is heat? Where does it go? Why does it fade? For most of human history, heat was a mystery, a force perhaps, a spirit. The ancient Greeks imagined a universe of 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And while the others could be touched or poured or shaped, fire was different. It transformed things. It left them changed, and it always danced away. But it wasn't until the late 1600s, in the flickering light of oil lamps and candle smoke, that thinkers began to measure heat, not just feel it, but study it. That's where the story begins. Let's start in the age of steam. In the 18th century, as factories began to fill the air with soot and pistons began to thump in rhythm with ambition, humans found themselves face to face with a new question. How much work can we get from heat? This wasn't just science, it was survival, power, progress, and it led to the birth of thermodynamics. One of the earliest heroes in this chapter was Sadi Carnot, a French engineer with a quiet mind and a gift for dreaming in mathematics. In 1824, he published a small book, little noticed at the time, called Reflections on the Motive Power of Fire. It was a poetic title, really, and in it Carnot asked, what's the best possible engine we could build? Not just in brass and coal, but in theory, the most efficient heat engine the universe would allow. From this came the Carnot cycle, a sequence of idealized steps that described how to turn heat into motion without losing any more than you must. It was beautiful, precise, and it hinted at something deeper, that not all energy was created equal. Some energy was more useful than other energy, and once it had spread out, it couldn't do work again. It was a whisper of entropy, though no one called it that yet. Then came Rudolf Clausius, a German physicist who, in the mid-1800s, gave that whisper a name. In 1865, Clausius introduced a word derived from the Greek tropos, meaning transformation. He called it entropy, and with a few strokes of chalk, he etched into the blackboard of science one of the most quietly devastating ideas ever written. The entropy of the universe tends to a maximum, not in anger, not in haste, just inevitably. It was a revelation. Not only did this explain why machines could never be 100% efficient, why no engine could ever be perfectly reversible, but it also suggested that the universe itself was moving, slowly, softly, toward disorder. Suddenly, entropy wasn't just an engineering problem, it was a law of nature, something woven into the fabric of reality. And then came Ludwig Boltzmann. If Clausius named entropy, Boltzmann tried to explain why it exists. He was a restless thinker, with a moustache that could intimidate chalk, and a mind that danced between equations like a poet. Boltzmann wanted to understand entropy from the ground up, from atoms. At the time, atoms were still just a theory. Tiny, invisible things no one had actually seen. But Boltzmann believed in them. He saw that if you treated matter as made of particles, billions and billions of them bouncing and colliding, you could describe entropy not as a vague tendency, but as a statistical inevitability. Entropy, he said, was about probability, about counting how many ways a system could be arranged. The more ways something could be shuffled, the higher its entropy. Order was rare, disorder was common. The universe wasn't choosing messiness, it was just choosing the most likely path. Boltzmann even carved this idea into his gravestone. Literally, the formula S Gabruma K log W, where S is entropy, K is Boltzmann's constant, and W is the number of microstates, the ways things can be arranged without looking different on the outside. Simple, profound, heartbreaking. Because while Boltzmann's ideas were brilliant, they were not widely accepted during his lifetime. He struggled with depression, with criticism, with the loneliness that sometimes accompanies being far ahead of your time. In 1906, he died by suicide. 2 decades later, the world of physics caught up to him. His equation still stands today, and with it, a new idea emerged, that entropy isn't just about heat, but about information. Enter the 20th century, a time of war, of wonder, of wireless communication, and at the heart of this new era was a man named Claude Shannon. Shannon wasn't studying heat. He was studying messages, how to send information from one place to another without losing its meaning. And what did he find? Entropy. Again. He realized that the same mathematics used to describe thermodynamic entropy could also describe uncertainty in communication. A noisy phone line, a garbled telegram, a corrupted file. All of them were battling entropy just like a steam engine did. Shannon redefined entropy as the average amount of surprise in a message. If you could predict every word, there was no surprise. Low entropy. But if each word was unexpected, entropy was high. And so entropy became the bridge between physics and information, between engines and emails, between fire and thought. But entropy wasn't done evolving. In the same century, a man named Stephen Hawking looked toward the sky and saw entropy staring back from the edge of black holes. Black holes had long been considered pure consumers, objects that swallowed everything, even light, leaving behind only silence. But Hawking discovered something strange. Black holes too had entropy. They had temperature. They could emit radiation, very slowly but inevitably, and eventually they could evaporate. That radiation, now called Hawking radiation, was a revolutionary idea. It meant that even black holes obeyed the laws of thermodynamics. Even the darkest corners of the universe were still part of the same thermodynamic story, begun by burning coal and melting butter. Entropy, it seemed, was not limited by scale. It governed everything from teacups to quasars, and now in the 21st century we are still learning what entropy means. Some physicists are exploring quantum entropy tied to entanglement and wave functions. Others are reimagining time itself as something emergent from entropy, not a fixed dimension, but a side effect of the way things change. Some ask whether the universe began in a low entropy state because that's the only kind of universe that could give rise to observers. Others wonder if entropy might eventually reverse, or if time could loop back on itself in the farthest corners of theory. And some just sit quietly, not looking for answers but admiring the symmetry of it all. That a question as simple as "why does tea get cold?" could lead to equations, to black holes, to poems, to bedtime stories like this one. So here we are. At the end of this little chapter in entropy's history, from Carnot's engines to Clausius's definitions, Boltzmann's equations to Shannon's signals, and Hawking's horizons, each step brought us closer to something that was always there. Change, drift, the quiet flow from what is to what was. Entropy is not a villain in this story. It's the stage, the pulse, the thread that turns events into stories, stories into memory, and memory into meaning. And while we may not understand all of it, we've walked far enough to say this. Entropy is not the end. It's the movement toward endings. And through those endings, new things begin. Even now, even here. Let's take a breath. Let the equations rest. Let the graphs fade to black. Because beneath all the measurements and models, behind every chalk-dusted proof and glowing simulation, there's always a deeper question. Not what is entropy, but what does it mean? Not just for the universe, but for you. Because somewhere between the flicker of a flame and the silence of a black hole, entropy becomes something more than math. It becomes a mirror, and the reflection it shows is both unsettling and strangely beautiful. Let's begin here. Why do we care that things fall apart? Why do we mourn the passage of time? Why does the last page of a book feel heavier than the 1,000 that came before it? Why do we treasure a moment not in spite of its ending, but because it ends? Entropy, this soft, invisible drift from order to disorder, might just be the reason we feel anything at all. Not just because it gives time a direction, but because it gives experience its weight. Without entropy, everything would be frozen. perfect, timeless, but also meaningless, because without change there is no story. A crystal, unchanging for 1 billion years, is lovely. But a single moment of laughter, messy, unrepeatable, fleeting, can mean more. That moment exists because of entropy. It comes and goes because the world around it refuses to sit still. You might think of entropy as loss, and in a way it is. But it's also revelation. It's what allows us to notice the light just before it fades, the warmth just before it leaves your hands, the people just before they walk away. Without entropy, we might live forever, but we'd never feel urgency, never feel the thrill of now, never feel the hush that comes when you realize something won't happen again. What if time isn't real, but entropy is? Some physicists wonder this. They ask if time, this thing we live by, plan around, measure with watches and birthdays, is just a label, an illusion we construct because entropy gives the illusion of flow, change gives the illusion of motion, memory gives the illusion of a past. Maybe what we call time is just our way of experiencing a universe that shifts from less likely to more likely states, from low entropy to high, from simplicity to noise. In this view, there is no present moving forward. There are just states, snapshots, each one complete, and you, your mind, your memories, your breath, are a particular arrangement of atoms and experience, a pattern, a shape in the stream. Maybe you don't travel through time. Maybe you're simply part of it. One page in an infinite book, one note in an internal chord. And maybe that's enough. What about identity? Who are you really in a world ruled by entropy? If everything changes, if even your cells are replaced every few years, what stays? Your memories? They shift. They fade. They're rewritten without permission. Your body? It ages. It forgets how it once moved. It stiffens. It softens. Your thoughts? They change too. Beliefs you held tightly once might seem foreign now. Even your voice may deepen. So what remains? Perhaps the self isn't a thing. Perhaps it's a process. A kind of entropy-powered continuity. Not a fixed flame, but a flickering pattern that persists just long enough to feel like someone. And maybe that's what makes you precious. Not permanence, but persistence. The fact that despite entropy, you hold together. Day by day, thought by thought, you reassemble yourself from the falling pieces. You're a dance between collapse and composition, and the fact that you hold form at all is a quiet miracle. Does the universe remember? Here's another question entropy whispers into the dark. Do we leave a trace? Does the universe record our presence, our breath, our brief conversations with one another and with the stars? Physics says that information cannot be destroyed. Even as things dissolve, as flames go out and waves break, the information they contained somehow remains, hidden, entangled, scrambled beyond recognition, but not gone. That idea has led some to suggest that the universe is a kind of memory machine, that all things are preserved not in their form, but in their influence, in the ripples they left, in the heat they shed, in the entropy they contributed. Maybe you don't live forever by freezing time. Maybe you live forever by changing it, by leaving echoes, by shifting the slope of possibility in even the smallest way. Entropy is the process by which the past becomes the present and the present becomes unreachable. But maybe the shape of what was never fully disappears. Maybe the universe remembers more than we think. What if death is just maximum entropy? Locally. We resist endings. We mourn them. We dread them. But entropy tells us that endings are not failures. They are simply part of the flow. A candle flickers out, and in doing so it has done exactly what it was meant to do. A wave crashes, and that is its purpose. Not to last forever, but to complete. We're afraid of death because we think it erases meaning. But maybe meaning is precisely because things end. If everything lasted, nothing would be precious. Nothing would be urgent, nothing would have a shape. A song is not ruined because it ends. A painting is not meaningless because the colours will fade. You are not less real because you are temporary. You are more. Because every second you exist is a second wrestled from the arms of entropy. And when you are gone, you won't be erased. You'll be reconfigured, returned, not as you were, but as everything else. The heat you gave, the thoughts you shared, the atoms you borrowed, they will go on, doing what entropy demands, making the universe just a little more mixed, a little more possible. Is entropy sacred? It may feel strange to think of a law of physics as holy, but consider this. Entropy is the closest thing we have to universal truth. It governs the stars. It shapes your breath. It hums in computers and coral reefs, in time zones and tears. It connects you to everything that has ever burned or cooled or changed. And it doesn't judge. It doesn't ask for belief. It simply is. A constant companion, a whisper in the silence, a shadow beside every candle, and maybe, just maybe, that makes it sacred. Not in a religious sense, but in the sense that it reminds us that we are not separate from the world, but made from its very rules. You're not floating above entropy. You're entropy in the shape of a person, listening quietly, perhaps drifting gently towards sleep. So what are we supposed to do knowing all this? That's the real question, isn't it? If everything fades, why write poems? Why fall in love? Why plant trees or take photos or clean the kitchen or tell bedtime stories about thermodynamics? Maybe because what matters isn't how long something lasts, but what it does while it's here. A moment of kindness, a perfectly ripe peach, a song shared with someone you love. Entropy means you can't keep them forever, but it also means you get to have them at all. Every ordered thing in your life, every memory, every embrace, every perfectly quiet evening with a voice in your ear and stars outside the window is a triumph, a bloom, a beautiful arrangement in a universe that allows it for just long enough to be real. And that's what you're doing now, even in sleep. You're participating in a universe that is constantly shifting, constantly creating the conditions for meaning, even as it melts everything away. Entropy isn't the enemy. It's the invitation, the shape of impermanence that makes everything precious. So we live, we lose, we let go, we try again. And through it all we keep moving, not away from meaning, but deeper into it, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one whisper of order in a world that listens even as it changes. There are grand, distant ways to talk about entropy. Stars collapsing, black holes whispering, heat death humming in the dark. But sometimes, the most powerful truths aren't found in the sky. They're sitting quietly in your kitchen. Entropy lives here too. It's in the crumbs on the counter, even though you cleaned yesterday. It's in the laundry basket that refills itself like a soft spell. It's in the candle whose wick is a little shorter each night, and the coffee ring on your favourite book from the morning you tried to do too many things at once. Entropy isn't some exotic idea locked away in physics labs. It's your everyday companion, polite, invisible, patient, and absolutely everywhere. You feel it in your schedule. You make a plan, but by noon emails pile up, a meeting runs long, a friend calls in tears, the order you made dissolves, you feel it in your home. The law of lived spaces is that they slowly, persistently tend toward disorder. Shoes inch away from where they belong, drawers fill with unnameable cables, junk accumulates in corners you swore would stay clean, but you don't stop trying. That's what's so lovely. Even knowing how things fall apart, you keep tidying. You keep reordering the world. It's not futile. It's hopeful. There's comfort in the ritual, not in defeating entropy, but in dancing with it. You clean the kitchen not because it will stay clean, but because it matters that you tried. Because it gives you a moment of peace, a pocket of clarity in the swirling drift. That's the secret of daily life. We don't control entropy. We cooperate with it. We say, okay, things fall apart, so let's make beauty where we can. Let's light a candle even if it burns out. Let's cook something warm even if it will be gone in an hour. Let's play music even though it ends. Because moments, like molecules, move forward, and entropy is what gives them shape. Now think of your emotions. Joy comes suddenly, then it leaves. Not because you did anything wrong, but because all feelings are fluid. Entropy doesn't spare the inner world. Memories fade, affections shift, moods soften, dissolve, rebuild. You're not static, and that's okay. There are mornings you wake up heavy, thoughts tangled, and nothing quite right. You might blame yourself. I didn't sleep well. I'm not doing enough. Something is wrong. But maybe you're just feeling the drift, the soft settling of the mind in motion. Entropy isn't depression, but it's part of what makes change constant, even when you don't ask for it. And so, emotions are not defects. They are waves on a larger sea. Your brain is full of entropy, new neural connections forming, old ones pruning away, memories folding into dreams. You're always becoming, never quite the same person you were last week, not even yesterday. It can be unsettling, but it can also be freeing, because it means you don't have to stay stuck. No matter how disordered you feel, how scattered, how far from some imagined ideal, entropy is also motion. It means you can begin again, even mid-sentence, even mid-life. There's also entropy in relationships. Friendships fade without a single fight. Not out of cruelty, but because life pulls people into different orbits. Entropy in action. You forget to call, they forget to reply, and over time, what was daily becomes yearly. What was sacred becomes nostalgic. Romantic relationships feel this too. In the beginning, everything is sharp. Every detail matters. Their voice, their scent, the way they say your name. But eventually, entropy enters. The edges blur. Comfort replaces urgency. Some stories get repeated. The mystery fades. And this isn't failure, it's natural. Entropy doesn't mean love disappears. It just means that effort must continue. Like tidying a room, you must keep noticing, rebuilding, choosing. Love isn't the absence of entropy. It's the art of holding shape as long as you can, and letting go gently when the shape must change. Even culture lives by entropy. Trends rise, then they fade. What felt fresh last year now feels worn. What was once sacred can become cliché. Languages evolve, words die, rituals simplify. It's tempting to mourn these losses, and sometimes that's right. But it's also a sign that culture is alive, because the only culture that never changes is the one that stopped breathing. Entropy allows for reinvention, for remixing, for honouring the past while not being frozen by it. It gives us jazz, street art, YouTube channels that turn physics into lullabies. And yes, it gives us nostalgia too, that aching sweetness for the way things were. But nostalgia is also proof that the moment mattered, that you noticed, that somewhere in the blur there was colour. Entropy even shows up in rituals, birthdays, New Year's Eve, graduation. These aren't just events. They're attempts to mark change, to pause the drift and say, this mattered, this happened, this ends. We light candles, make toasts, take photographs, not to stop entropy, but to partner with it, to say, yes, things are moving, but I'm watching, I'm feeling it, I'm alive inside the motion. Even funerals are this, a structured space to witness the greatest entropy of all, the end of a person's form, and yet, through stories, songs, tears, we give that ending a shape, a ceremony, a frame, because humans have always tried to wrap entropy in meaning, and sometimes we succeed. Now let's talk about aging, that slow, soft entropy we all carry. Your skin changes, your hair, your strength, your ability to bounce back after a late night. And you might fight it. Creams, routines, resistance. That's okay. But maybe you can also see it as something natural, even tender. Because aging isn't just breakdown, it's recording. Your body isn't falling apart, it's becoming more detailed. Every line is a sentence, every ache, a paragraph, every scar, a page from the story of you. Entropy writes on all of us, and if you can read it softly, without judgment, you might find that it's not vandalism, it's calligraphy. Even boredom is entropy. You start the day fresh, full of attention, order. But hours pass, noise builds, distractions blur, and suddenly you're clicking through tabs, not even sure why. That's not failure. That's mental entropy. The mind too disperses, which is why silence feels so good. Not because it's empty, but because it gives you back your shape. Meditation, naps, even these long, slow videos, they aren't about doing nothing. They're about reordering, about softening into slowness so your thoughts can settle again. Entropy rises, and you respond not with panic but with pause. That's peace. And then there's creativity, which seems like the opposite of entropy, something new, something structured, born from chaos, but it's actually powered by entropy. You can't be creative without letting go, letting old ideas dissolve, letting blank pages stare you down. Creativity is the art of shaping noise, taking the mess and making meaning. Entropy gives you the raw material, and you arrange it. Every sentence, every sketch, every melody, you're not escaping entropy, you're dancing with it. You build a sandcastle, knowing the tide is coming, but for now it's beautiful. So now, look around. Your room, your phone, your memories. Entropy is everywhere, but not as a threat. It's the setting for your story, the flow that gives shape to the stillness, the reason we cherish quiet, the reason we celebrate change, the reason we hold on to one another a little tighter before saying goodbye. Entropy means you can't control everything, but it also means you don't have to. Because in a world that falls apart, the act of caring, of arranging, noticing, loving, is revolutionary. You don't have to fix it all. You just have to light one candle, fold one blanket, say one kind word. And in doing so, you place a little bit of order in the arms of impermanence, not forever, just for now, and maybe now is enough. Close your eyes, or let them blur, because now we step across a threshold, from the world as we know it to the one we only wonder about. This is the place where science stretches, where thought becomes dream, and entropy becomes not just a law, but a character in a story still being written. Let's ask the forbidden question. What if you could reverse entropy? Not just in theory, not just in lab simulations with particle clouds and perfect equations, but really, undo the melting, unburn the fire, watch the sandcastle rise again from the foam. Would it feel like time reversing? Would the coffee in your cup grow hotter, the cream climb back into the pitcher, the conversation rewind its laughter and fall quiet? Would you go backward too? Or would you just watch, motionless, as the world around you folded itself into earlier forms? If entropy defines the arrow of time, then reversing entropy would be reversing reality, unmaking it, unliving it. But here's the strange thing. Physics doesn't forbid this. Not exactly. The laws, Newtonian, relativistic, quantum, don't require a forward direction. They're symmetric. They don't care. The only law that seems to care, the one that whispers no going back, is the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy. It increases, always. But in rare, isolated, improbably small systems, it can wiggle the other way. Statistically, briefly. So, what if? What if time isn't flowing, but we are? Here's a thought experiment. Imagine that every moment of your life, from your first breath to this exact second, exists as a single, unmoving frame, like a still image in a cosmic flipbook. Now imagine that consciousness, this very experience of awareness, is like a light shining through each frame in sequence. You're not moving, time isn't flowing, but your experience is, and that experience is ordered by entropy. In each new frame there are more microstates, more possibilities, more disorder, and so you feel a flow, from memory to forgetting, from potential to decay, from child to elder, but the frames are all there, eternal, timeless. What moves is you, not in space, but in perception, a soft, continuous act of becoming. Like a traveller on a train passing through landscapes that were always there. Entropy isn't the train, it's the scenery, and maybe, somewhere beyond it, the whole map already exists. Now let's imagine something bolder, a universe where entropy doesn't rise, where it stays still, flat, unmoving. What would that look like? No melting, no mixing, no fading, just perfect balance, perfect symmetry, perfect stillness. Sounds peaceful, maybe, but also terrifying, because without entropy nothing would happen. No thoughts, no weather, no music. Change requires imbalance, requires some places to be hot and others cold, some things to be broken and others whole, some paths to be more likely than others. Without entropy you couldn't even have a story, because a story is just a string of differences, a sequence of states, each more entropic than the last, each choice closing doors, each memory shaping the next. In a world without entropy, there'd be no before, no after, just a frozen tableau, a museum of unrealized potential. And you? You wouldn't be listening, because you wouldn't be changing. So perhaps entropy isn't the villain, it's the permission slip for experience. Now picture this, a civilization that conquers entropy. They've mastered energy, they can reverse processes, hold structures intact for millennia, keep stars burning on their own terms. They've unlocked the ability to slow or stop decay. Maybe they live forever. Maybe they archive every moment. Maybe their cities gleam untouched by rust or ruin. But here's the strange part. Would they still feel alive? If everything lasts, if nothing fades, then what gives meaning? A love letter preserved for 10,000 years would lose its urgency. A song would never end. A day would stretch forever. Without entropy, maybe there's no bittersweetness, no nostalgia, no poignancy. And maybe, without those, even beauty becomes less beautiful. It's not the foreverness of things that moves us. It's the knowledge that they won't be here forever. So even this perfect civilization, with its control over entropy, might one day choose to let go, to allow some systems to fray, to fall, to return, not out of failure but out of longing for impermanence. Now imagine parallel universes, each with different entropic laws. One where entropy runs backward, another where it fluctuates, a third where it resets like a wave. In one, people are born with the memories of their death and live backward toward birth. In another, time loops. Entropy climbs, then collapses, then rises again. In yet another, entropy doesn't exist, and so everything happens all at once, a kaleidoscope of eternities. Would consciousness even work in such a place? Is the experience of being alive something that requires entropy, like a candle requires oxygen? Or could life evolve in a medium where change has no direction? Would time travel even be interesting if entropy didn't exist? Because time travel, as we imagine it, isn't really about moving through time. It's about escaping entropy, cheating decay, saving the thing we lost, undoing the thing we regret. But without entropy, there would be nothing to lose, nothing to undo, so maybe all our fantasies about portals and paradoxes, wormholes and world hopping are really just stories about grief and the wish to unfeel it. Let's play with paradox. What happens if someone builds a machine that reduces entropy, Not locally, but everywhere. A perfect refrigerator, a cosmic air conditioner, something that restores order without producing heat, something that breaks the law. In theory, it can't exist, but let's say it does. You turn it on. Slowly, the air becomes crisp, memories sharpen, wrinkles fade, the mess undoes itself. People get younger, wounds close, ashes become trees, eventually stars unburn, planets unform, the Big Bang unreverses, and then there's silence, because you've hit minimum entropy, the lowest possible state, absolute order, no motion, no differentiation, no tension, no thoughts, no questions, no you. The paradox is complete. By trying to escape entropy, you erase the very conditions that made life possible. The machine worked, but in doing so, it ended everything, which makes entropy, once again, look less like a punishment and more like a blessing. And now let's return. Not to theory, but to wonder. Let's suppose, for one quiet minute, that entropy is not just a law of physics, but a kind of language, a cosmic grammar written into the structure of time, a way for the universe to say, this is happening, this is real, this will pass. Entropy gives everything a shape, a beginning, middle, and end. And maybe, somewhere beyond entropy, there's something else, a principle we haven't named yet, a rule that describes not just what changes but what remembers, not what falls apart but what arises again. Maybe entropy isn't the end of the sentence, just the comma before a new one begins. So here we are, still wondering, still imagining, still dreaming about laws we can't touch but somehow feel every day. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. Not just to live by the rules of entropy, but to play with them, to write stories, to ask what if, to hold on to meaning even as it slips through our fingers. Entropy takes, but it also gives us time, enough time to love, to try, to ask questions that have no answers, like what happens next, what happens after endings, what does it mean to exist in a universe that forgets us slowly. And even as we fall asleep, the questions keep flowing, like stars unraveling their own soft secrets into the night. And maybe that's enough. Maybe entropy isn't what we thought it was. Maybe it isn't a doom, a collapse, a flaw in the fabric. Maybe it's a rhythm, a hush between heartbeats, a soft unraveling, necessary, not cruel. Because now, after all our wandering, through equations and memories, black holes and coffee stains, it's clear. Entropy isn't just a scientific term, it's a way of seeing. It's the story told by cooling tea, by birthday candles melting onto cake, by autumn leaves surrendering to gravity with such grace it feels like dance. Let's breathe with that for a moment. Let's return to where we started, not with answers, but with attention. You are here now, alive at the cusp of 1,000 tiny dissolutions, cells dying, thoughts drifting, moments passing. You're surrounded by entropy, but you're also sculpting within it. That breakfast you made? Entropy. That laugh you shared? Entropy. That photograph you took of a sunset, knowing full well it would never look exactly like that again? Entropy. But each was a kind of defiance, not resistance, not war, but willingness. A willingness to notice what fades, to say, this moment matters, even if it won't last, especially because it won't last. That's what makes it a moment after all, and maybe that's what makes it beautiful. Think of the metaphors we've used: time as a river, entropy as a slope, order as a sandcastle just before the tide returns. But maybe there's another image, the mirror. Entropy, perhaps, is not just the thing that changes the world, it's the thing that shows us the world. Like fog on glass revealing the trace of a hand, like a cracked bowl highlighting the care it once carried. Entropy reflects, not just decay, but having been. Without it, there would be no texture, no memory, no reason to hold a hand or say goodbye. It is the condition of feeling, the price and the gift of presence. You're not here despite entropy. You're here because of it. Because stars exploded. Because molecules mixed. Because warmth flowed outward and structure came together for just long enough to build the mind listening to these words. You are a brief equilibrium in an ongoing diffusion, and that's not bleak, that's magnificent. Let's revisit some of the shapes we passed through. We began in wonder, in candlelight and quiet questions. Why does everything change? Why does everything end? We wandered into feeling, into dreams that collapse, soups that cool, teacups that shatter. We explored myths, machines, mathematics. We followed entropy through factories to stars, to the edge of space-time, to the back of our own minds. We saw it not as destruction, but as possibility, as the thing that gives time its arrow and stories their shape. We watched it rise, not only in systems, but in civilizations, in hearts, in friendships left too long unanswered. We traced its fingerprints through rituals, memory, grief. We speculated. What if it could reverse? What if we could escape it? What would remain? And each time we returned to the same quiet truth. Entropy is not something to fix. It is something to understand, to work with, to move within, to hold gently, even as it slips through us. You are part of this law, not separate from it. Every breath you take is a negotiation with entropy. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, energy exchanged, structure maintained for a little while longer. Every thought is an arrangement of molecules on the edge of rearrangement. Every act of love is a moment of order in a universe that forgets, and that forgetting? It's not a cruelty. It's a space, a clearing, a place for something new to emerge. You're not here to resist entropy. You're here to dance with it, to tidy what you can, to write what you remember, to let go when the moment calls. And in doing so, you become part of something vast, not eternal, but alive. So maybe it's not about fixing the universe, or solving for time, or building a machine that never rusts. Maybe it's about lighting a candle knowing it will burn down, and loving it for that very reason. Maybe it's about planting a seed that you'll never see bloom. Maybe it's about sitting with someone you love in complete silence, and feeling that silence is the most sacred thing in the world. Entropy says, this won't last. And we say, exactly. Think of your body, right now, resting, rebuilding. Even sleep is entropy's partner. A moment for the brain to tidy, file, let go. You forget things every night. You dream. You wake up slightly different. And that's the point. You're never the same person twice. But you always carry a trace of the person you were, like footsteps on a soft shore. Fading, but undeniable. You're not losing yourself. You're refining. Entropy lets you begin again. Each day, each moment, you shed skin, you shed stories, you let go of who you thought you had to be. And in that loss you find space for what matters now. So maybe the purpose isn't to resist change, but to shape it. To leave behind echoes, not monuments. To pass warmth forward, not keep it hoarded. To let life and light flow through you. Entropy gives everything an arc, a rise, a fall, a memory. And the fall is not the failure. It is the return, a return to silence, to stillness, to stars. In the end, entropy is not here to scare you. It's here to guide you, to remind you that the world is not static, that beauty comes and goes, that nothing is guaranteed but the fact of motion, and motion is how meaning arrives. So we say goodbye to the moment, to the sentence, to the self we were when we began. But we do so softly, gratefully, because now we know every goodbye contains the shape of something real, and everything real is touched by entropy. So here's the last image I'll leave you with. You, lying in bed, breathing. Heart ticking like a metronome in a quiet room. All around you, entropy is unfolding. Dust settling, air molecules dancing, the planet spinning slowly in the dark. And you're still, not frozen, not trapped, but held, gently, in the soft, slow stream of everything. You're not behind, you're not late, you're exactly where you're meant to be, falling gently through the pages of a universe that is always turning towards something new. So, where are you now? What time is it? Wherever you are. Has the light in your room dimmed just a little since we began? Has your body softened, your mind slowed? You've travelled far, not in miles but in meaning. From steam engines to stars, from candlelight to collapse, you've wandered with me through the quiet laws that shape the life we live. And now you're floating, somewhere between sleep and thought. Still enough to feel the stillness, awake enough to sense the hush. Entropy hasn't left us. It's still here, a soft background hum. The reason your heartbeat isn't the same as it was 20 minutes ago. The reason your blanket feels warmer than it did before. The reason your thoughts, once crowded and jittery, have begun to drift like leaves on still water. And maybe that's what we needed all along. Not answers, not certainty. Just a space to breathe, to feel small and part of everything at the same time. So if this gave you peace tonight, if it helped you slow down, soften, let go, I'd be grateful if you gave it a like or subscribed. Not for growth, not for numbers, but so this quiet corner can find others who need it too. And now, dear traveller, your journey continues. Not through words, but through rest. Through that soft, invisible unfolding that sleep brings. The stories will keep spinning, the stars will keep burning, and entropy will keep humming its patient song. But for now, you can let go of all of it. You've earned stillness. You've earned sleep. So close your eyes, breathe gently, and sleep well, fellow traveller, wherever and whenever you are. Good night.